Hello and welcome to Firewall Management 201. I'm Professor Wool. Today we're going to be talking about the complexities of the firewall change request process and what you can do about it. So what do I mean by the change workflow? When you need to make a firewall rule change in your organization, possibly you're introducing a new server, you're changing an application that requires changing some firewalls to allow that traffic, you need to follow a process. And that process involves several steps and several teams. A typical process includes the following steps. Once a request is made, you need to check whether that request is a valid request and whether it is something that is in line with corporate policies, or maybe it's going to violate some requirement. Once you've checked it, you need to plan, you need to identify which devices you have to touch and how to do that. Then you need to implement the change using the firewall vendor's native management systems. You need to validate that the change was done correctly, that exactly what was requested was in fact implemented, no more and no less. You need to measure how long the process took so that you can be in line with your SLAs. Eventually, you need to audit the change to be able to demonstrate that the change was done for a good business reason. And you probably need to recertify it after a year or two. You need to find out whether you still need that traffic allowed in your organization, or maybe you can eliminate that rule. And all of these steps are typically done by different organizations and different team members. So doing the risk check is typically done by your information security team, whose job it is to make sure that the traffic that is requested is not in violation with your regulatory compliance or your internal policies and procedures. The planning phase is typically done by the network architecture team that know which, or they can find out which firewalls that they need to modify. And this could be lengthy because if you have hundreds of devices, just finding out which ones you need to touch to employ a certain change is a difficult task. Then implementation is typically done by the security operations team that have to have the expertise to open up the various management tools and to write the new rules. Validation is done by the same team typically, either by the security operations team or by network architecture. SLA is calculated in many steps along the way. Audit is done by a dedicated audit team, possibly an external auditor. And recertification involves possibly all of these people all over again, just following a new workflow for checking whether the traffic is still necessary. And all of this takes time. We estimate that the whole process could take anywhere to about 4 hours net per change. Now these 4 hours are spent across different team members, each doing their own job, and they could be spent over a period of time that could be anywhere between 2 days and a few weeks. But just net hours spent, 4 hours is a pretty reasonable estimate. And if you think about the cost involved here, so 4 hours at a rate of about $100 per hour, and depending on how many changes you make, could lead to significant costs. So if you're a small organization that only processes somewhere in the vicinity of 10 changes per week, you're looking at a $200,000 expense per year. If you're a busy organization that processes 100 changes every week, you're easily looking at a $2 million cost just for the operational aspect of working this workflow. So there are significant challenges here in terms of time and cost. And that is even before we take into account the additional work that has to be done to accommodate next generation firewalls, where you might need to process even more changes to filter traffic based on the various changes in the applications with their extra granularity and extra work. So these are fairly conservative estimates. Now, if you want to do something about it, well, there are two general approaches that can be used. The first is just automating the process. if you use a good change management system that makes sure that the information goes from team to team, from step to step, never gets lost along the way, information flows according to the right process and addresses and reaches the right people, you're going to be saving time just through the flow automation. The second thing that you can do, the second approach, is actually speeding up each and every one of these steps through intelligent algorithms and through domain expertise. And what do I mean by that? Well, take for example the check phase. You need to find out whether requested traffic is going to violate any kind of regulatory compliance. Well, you can have a system that checks that for you. It does a what-if analysis and identifies whether the requested traffic is going to violate any kind of compliance requirement. When you're in the planning phase and you need to discover which firewalls you have to modify, you could have a system that is aware of the routing in the infrastructure and understands which firewalls are in the routing path and can tell you which firewalls you need to modify and which firewalls are blocking the traffic. When you're in the implementation phase, you can have a system that automatically knows which objects you can reuse. Maybe it tells you which rules you can modify because they're similar to what you need. Maybe it could even go as far as injecting the change directly into the firewall using the vendor's APIs. When you do validation, you can automatically check whether, after the change has been done, whether the firewalls that were previously blocking, maybe now they are already allowing the traffic as they're supposed to. So you can check that automatically as well. When you're doing recertification, for instance, you can have a system that automatically identifies which requests deserve to be recertified and when, and can activate a new dedicated workflow to identify all the right individuals that have to be involved in the recertification and assist them in the process of this rule recertification. So the combination of general workflow automation and domain-specific algorithms with domain expertise offers the opportunity to save a great deal of expenses here on this operational cost of the firewall change request process. So the take-home message here is, you have this process, it's complicated, it takes a long time, but the good news is there are systems out there that can reduce the time and the cost here and could help you reach more reasonable expense levels. Thank you very much.